Welcome back to Silverstone then for our second and final race of the weekend for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship. They had a race earlier on in or yesterday I should say actually, in pretty nice conditions. It's a bit damp and a bit greasy now though for race number 2, and will probably have caused a little bit of a headache for the teams setup-wise because it is not fully wet out there. They'll be on wet tyres, of that I'm fairly sure, but it's not fully wet, and there is a chance that maybe someone has taken a bit of a setup gamble. That might prove to be effective because we are right in between sort of wet and dry conditions right now. A dry-ish racing line, I think, but over 25 minutes of racing, those wet tyres are going to take some abuse, and it may be that those who are gentle with them in the early stages are going to come out on top at the end. In yesterday's race, it was a victory for Garlick. He sort of dominated, really, pulled at one point, I think 3 seconds or more clear of Mckenzie Douglass at the front of the pack, but then backed off towards the end. He won fairly comfortably though, led every single lap of the race, with Mckenzie Douglass coming home second and Nick White in third position. Has got a little bit warmer as the day has gone on. The ambient temperature is probably just underneath 10 degrees, but the track temperature slightly above that. Still full cloud skies, but not raining for the time being. That is good news. We want to see these cars really able to stretch their legs. The Silverstone Grand Prix circuit has produced some great racing already this weekend. Yesterday's Ginetta GT Championship race, though, was fairly quiet, actually, it must be said. Most of the action was happening behind the race leaders, in the midfield, really. What will the story be for race 2? Well, at the start, it will be all about Garlick versus Mckenzie Douglass from the front row of the grid. Xentek Motorsport ahead of Fox Motorsport on row 1. Nick White and Ben McKenna, meanwhile, will share row number 2 of the grid, and row number 3 for Harry Mangiam and Martin Thomas. Back half of the grid then begins with John Kearney alongside Peter Mangian on row number 4. Row 5, we will find Matt Shaw, one to watch, I think, should move forward from there, and Dan Reeve, Conor Garlic at the back of the field. So Conor Garlic with it all to do, really, and he's at the back because his second fastest lap time in qualifying wasn't particularly quick, and he actually had a bit of a difficult qualifying session anyway. Started middle of the pack, I seem to recall, for race 1, managed to fight his way back through into 4th position, but wasn't actually quite as strong as I maybe expected him to be. Well, now he's got to come from the very back. He's going to struggle, I think, to get away with that leading bunch. Getting the first look at the track conditions out at the top end of the circuit, and actually that looks pretty dry, doesn't it? I wonder if anyone has taken a gamble on slick tyres. They have a choice between a slick and a wet tyre in this championship. Look at Conor Garlic really sliding the car through club corner, but I wonder if anyone has tried to make the gamble, because it really does not look that wet out there. Easy for me to say, I know, because I don't have to go and drive the cars, but there's no spray, there's no standing water, definitely. Offline still damp, definitely, but online, not too bad at all. Through Abbey we go on board with Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw, who is running in the AM class, second of the AMs in race 1. A season-long battle, I think, is in prospect between himself and Nick White for the AM class victory. This is Conor Garlic, definitely worth sticking an onboard camera in his car, because he's going to be coming through from the back of the field, vigorously weaving around to get the heat into the tyres. I would have thought if they were on wet tyres, maybe they wouldn't be weaving quite so vigorously, because those tyres are going to get very warm very quickly, I would have thought, on what is basically now actually a dry track. So maybe we are looking at slick tyres for the most part. Anyway, we'll find out in due course. It should be fairly obvious if there's a difference in tyres. Anyway, it's going to be a 2x2 rolling start. No notification of 2 green flag laps this time around, because they've had a wet race. In fact, no, sorry, the GT Championship cars haven't had a wet race yet, have they? Their race yesterday was dry, so we might get 2 green flag laps if this race has been declared wet. The light's certainly not out on the safety car yet, and they're staying single file, so that would suggest maybe we're getting another lap to assess the conditions. The time hasn't yet started ticking down either. I wonder if that will happen as they begin now this second lap behind the safety car. So round Woodcote they come then towards the timing line. There's Conor Garlic at the back, in behind new driver to the championship, Dan Reeve. We do now see the time start ticking down, so the race has started behind the safety car, and that means it will probably be a single file start as opposed to a 2x2 start when we do eventually go racing. Conor Garlic then moving around through Copse Corner. Now, trying to take a look at those tyres, see if I can figure out what he's on. He certainly seems to be putting a lot more energy into the tyres than anybody else, which maybe suggests that he has maybe gone for the slick tyre gamble. I noticed a sort of yellow sidewall to his tyres, which I'm not really seeing on anyone else's. That may well denote that it is a slick Pirelli tyre. That is Luke Garlick out in front, starting from the front of the grid. And it's hard to see, isn't it, really, when they're going by even this sort of speed, what those tyres are. But he is weaving around a moderate amount to create that friction across the ground. It's really the accelerating and then the heavy braking. That's what really warms tyres up. You can generate a bit of surface temperature by weaving from side to side, but actually it's by stamping on the brakes. Those brake discs operate at such a high temperature, and that temperature has to go somewhere, so it sort of dissipates out into the tyre and heats the tyre from the very core. So that actually is the better way of warming the tyres up, which is why you see them accelerate and then stamp on the brakes. It looks a bit like they're brake testing the cars behind them, but that's not the case. That is just them trying to generate some tyre warmth. Board again with Matt Shaw, moving up from the Ginetta GT Academy, as is Nick White, his Raceway Motorsport teammate, but also his rival, really, in the AM class this year. Matt Shaw's had flashes of brilliance this season, couple of dramas at Oulton Park last time out, but got a solid top 5 overall, second in class earlier on. It means that in the championship, early doors I know, but Mckenzie Douglass is 6 points clear of Luke Garlic in the overall championship now. Of course, that gap came down by 7 in race 1 yesterday, with Luke Garlic getting the better of Mckenzie. With Conor Garlic then a further 9 back to the top 3 in the pro category, covered by only 15 points. It is not quite as close in the AM class because Nick White has been Mr. Consistency, really, on the podium within his class in every race so far this season. In fact, never finishing worse than second. He's had 3 class wins on the bounce. And Nick White, therefore, 52 points clear of Paul Livesey, who is actually second. He's only 18 ahead of Matt Shaw, though, and of course, Paul Livesey not racing this weekend. If he comes back, he will use these races as his dropped scores, but if he doesn't, then Matt Shaw will inherit that second place in the championship anyway. But with drop scores to be accumulated as the season goes on, Matt Shaw with a non-finish, basically 2 non-finishes actually, it was in Oulton Park last time out, will get himself back into contention. Well, we are going to go 2x2 for the start then, that's good news. So we get a 2x2 rolling start. We get Luke Garlic and Mckenzie Douglass together on the front row of the grid. Garlic, the black and blue car, on the left, as it will be when we look at them head on the right as the drivers look at it. And then on his outside, Mckenzie Douglass, the white and orange number 24 car, who is going to get the jump. The result of this race could see, potentially, a swing in that championship lead. If Garlic were to win with the fastest lap, then he would take over the championship lead. So an important race, potentially, this, as we conclude our second event in the season. Round number 5 of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship then is upon us. We're going to have 21.5 minutes left on the clock, and Luke Garlic looks to try and do exactly what he did in race 1 and convert pole position into the lead at turn 1, and a fairly comfortable race victory. Off they go across the line and towards Copse Corner on the inside line. Luke Garlic, look at Nick White though, coming on the inside of everybody. They're 3 wide for second place. Out wide goes Mckenzie Douglass. Garlic was wide too. Both of them well beyond track limits, but I think Luke Garlic is going to hang on just about to the race lead. Down through Maggots and Beckett's. Yes, Garlic hanging on, but that looks as though we're going to have Mckenzie Douglass under a bit of threat for that second position, because Ben McKenna is through into P2. So Ben McKenna, having started 4th, 2 places gained. Matt Shaw, meanwhile, seems to have dropped down the order slightly from where he started, so he's got some work to do. But it is Luke Garlic, Ben McKenna, and then Mckenzie Douglass, the top 3. 4th place, Nick White, who was punchy at the start, wasn't he? Looking up the inside of everybody into Copse Corner. And then 5th position for Harry Mangian. Down through Stowe we go. And then McKenna hunting around behind the number 71 machine, trying to find an opening. Slide their way out of Stowe, down the hill towards the club chicane. McKenna looking like he's up for the fight here. Actually wasn't really able to live with the front runner's pace yesterday in qualifying for this race. He was 9/10 slower than Luke Garlic. At the moment, looks like he's got a bit of a chance to challenge for the race lead. This, meanwhile, is Conor Garlic. So Conor Garlic, remember, started at the very back, and I think has only gained 1 position so far. I think that is still Peter Mangian ahead of us. So Conor Garlic only picking up the 1 spot. Frustrated with that, and doesn't really seem to have the pace to go after the cars ahead, which I actually think does lend itself to my theory that he's on slick tyres, because he would normally, with the greatest of respect to the likes of Peter Mangian and those just ahead of him, he would normally have been able to at least keep up with them, probably be quite a bit quicker than them. So the fact that he can't suggests to me he's on slicks, and that car I think is going to get quicker as the race goes on. So the top three then getting away. Nick White on his own in 4th, Harry Mangian 5th, 6th place and 2nd of the AMs is Martin Thomas. Battle on for 2nd though, as Ben McKenna now maybe just starts to slip away from the race leader slightly. Back into the clutches of Mckenzie Douglass, Fox Motorsport driver in 3rd. Round Luffield corner then, out through Woodcote. Rest of the midfield runners going through as a big slide from McKenna, and that sort of lazy slide, the power slide almost out to the corner, that tells me he's definitely on wets, because if it was slicks it would have snapped sideways. That was a nice long lazy gradual slide, but it didn't do anything for his run off the corner, and so Mckenzie Douglass is all over him as they go through Copse corner, looks to try and get the switch back on the exit, carry that speed down towards Maggots and Beckett. Is there an overlap between the two of them? There might just be, you know. Mckenzie Douglass keeps on coming down the inside line, and I think this is going to be Mckenzie Douglass into 2nd position. He's on the wet side of the road into Beckett's though, and full commitment from Ben McKenna right round the outside. Fantastic stuff, but I think he's already in danger of overheating those wet tyres, because that car is sliding through every single corner, and we're only a lap and a bit into the race. So some pretty spectacular driving from Ben, but perhaps not all that mindful of tyre management. Down the hanger straight they go then. They're all bunching together now. Harry Mangian a part of this battle in 5th place as well, the blue, white and orange car. As once again, Mckenzie Douglass looks to try and make a move. Goes to the outside at Stowe. Now the track is drying out. That's not necessarily where the grip is. There's no grip where McKenna is though. It doesn't seem to matter what line he uses. He will be sideways. And again, another slide means he's slow off the corner, but then very late on the brakes into club. So he is defending as if his life depends on it here. And so far, it's proving successful. Manages to hang on to 2nd again, but look, rear of the car just will not stay planted. He is sliding his way out of every corner, and Douglass is back up the inside. They almost lean on each other coming off club, but still Ben McKenna hangs on. This is brilliant racing between these two. You get the feeling, don't you, that Nick White, certainly 3rd car in this group, doesn't really want to join in, because his battle is to win the AM class, not to really take it to the pros. He'd like to, of course, but he doesn't want to risk any contact, which he nearly has with Harry Mangian, who's also a pro. Looks to pull up alongside him. They all stay in the same order, though, as they turn through the tight left-hander at the loop, slowest corner on the track. Very tight line taken by McKenna coming off the turn, and again that kills his momentum, parks the car on the apex and entries sideways, and this time surely Mckenzie Douglass will get the job done. He's got the inside line, he's got much more momentum coming out onto the straight, and I think he should be able to brake later than McKenna, will he? McKenna actually is later on the brakes, tries to go right round the outside, but no, there's no way he could fend off Mckenzie Douglass that time, and Douglass does finally slip through into 2nd position, but then drifts very wide at Luffield. So too does McKenna though, so Nick White steals 3rd place. Nicely done from Nick White, well and truly taking the fight to the pros, and he is up into 3rd spot. So Nick White onto the overall podium, but actually really that just gets him out of a spot of bother. He didn't really want to be in that group that were starting to get very, very close together, very feisty, and his AM class lead is now a little bit more secure. So they come across the line then. Fastest lap of the race set by Luke Garlick, a 2:24.9, the first flying lap of the race. Conor Garlic did a 2:29.0 and did gain 2 positions on that lap, but he was about 4 seconds, let's say, slower than his brother. But is that because he's in traffic, or is it because he's on slick tyres, or perhaps a combination of the two? You can see what I mean, though, about these cars at the front that are very obviously on wets. The cars are very soft, they're very lazy, they're sort of quite spongy, almost wallowing through the corners. You just get these long, lazy slides on corner entry and exit, whereas a slick-shod car will look a bit snappier, a bit pointier, a bit more unpredictable. If we do get a chance to drag our eyes off this battle and focus on Conor Garlic, it would be interesting to see the body language of the number 63 car, compare it to that of Ben McKenna, who is certainly the most exciting driver to watch, but perhaps not the fastest man on the track. Nick White, though, looks like he's pretty racy, pulls to the outside of Mckenzie Douglass now for 2nd place. Couldn't quite get it done on the way into the club chicane, but can he now get the run on the exit of the turn? Slides over the curb, does Douglass. White is on the inside and there's contact sideways for Douglass. Did well to gather that together, but Nick White just put his nose where it wasn't really wanted there. Mckenzie Douglass closed the door and actually was very fortunate not to get turned around the front of the 57 car. And that's exactly what I mean with Nick White not really wanting to mix it too much with the pros. As much as he wants to prove a point and prove that he's every bit as quick as them, a little bit of contact could end his race altogether, and at the moment he's comfortably outscoring the likes of Matt Shaw, who we expect to be his big AM Class Championship rival. Being caught now, I think, by the number 75 car as well, aren't they, of Martin Thomas. Then it is Shaw, and then it's Conor Garlic. So Conor Garlic on this lap. Purple in sector 1, half a second quicker than the race leader. So Conor Garlic, the car at the back of shot, I am increasingly convinced is running on slicks, and he's getting quicker and quicker with every turn that goes by. This could well become a fastest lap of the race for him. Let's see the body language of the car as it drops into Brooklands. We're riding on board with him. Look how tentative he's being with the steering. He can't just sort of hurl the car into the corners the same way that the others can. He'll be telling on power here. I think coming out of Luffy, he's got so much more mid-corner grip there. Yeah, he's definitely on slicks. Definitely Conor Garlic is on slick tyres. He's just driven past Matt Shaw, who, yes, is an AM driver, relatively inexperienced, but still, that was far too easy for Conor Garlic, and I suspect that even with that overtake, this will be a new fastest lap of the race, a 2:25.498. No, not quite. That overtake just dropping him half a second in the final sector, but Conor Garlic is starting to come into his own with 13 minutes and 40 seconds still to go. And as the track continues to dry out, that slick tyre advantage will get bigger and bigger as the race goes on, and the wets will get slower and slower, actually, as they start to overheat and wear out more quickly. So he could feasibly start taking chunks of time out of the cars ahead, and McKenna again drifts his way onto the hanger straight, but somehow he's managing to place that car well in order to defend the place from Harry Mangian. Got now Martin Thomas trying to pull level as well, but Conor Garlic's almost with them already. Mangian peaks to the inside, that doesn't work, goes back to the outside again into Stowe corner. We know that McKenna is probably going to get quite sideways through Stowe. There it is, nice little drift, but they're all starting to slide around as those tyres overheat, whereas Conor Garlic, look, if anything, had a bit of understeer there because he just couldn't quite turn the car in, didn't quite have the confidence to do so. McKenna almost overtaken by Mangian into club, but he sails into the corner desperately late on the brakes, as has been his way really since the start of the race. He's sideways off the corner, and this time Mangian's going to go through on the inside line, so Harry Mangian steals fourth place, all well wide over the curb for McKenna, and here will come Martin Thomas. Can't quite draw level. And actually, he's got to watch out now for Conor Garlic. Conor Garlic, is he brave enough to go around the outside? No, because that's the wetter side of the road, stays on the racing line, and that car, it's almost like it's in a different class, isn't it? It's just got so much more mid-corner speed. McKenna ahead of us, sliding around all over the place. And the sectors on this lap then, Conor Garlic in sector 1 was a full 1.5 seconds quicker than the race leader. He's almost into the back of Ben McKenna as they turn into the loop. McKenna sideways. Who's surprised? Not me. Conor Garlic is, well, look at this, fastest of anybody in sectors 1, 3 and 4. The only reason he's not been faster than anyone in sector 2 is because he's always been in traffic at that part of the track. But he is taking seconds per sector out of the race leader. Forget seconds per lap. Ben McKenna, though, just will not go down without a fight. Will he? Sails back through on the inside line. Can Conor Garlic get the switchback coming out of Brooklands? The answer is no, but this is not going according to the script now for Garlic. He needs to get past McKenna as quickly as possible because McKenna, as well as being on wet tyres, is on very overheated wet tyres and is really holding him up. Matt Shaw is in the gravel in the background, but Garlic finally breaks through the defences of car number 27 and does now gain another place. So Conor Garlic into 5th position. He is 14.3 seconds behind the race leader. The trouble is that although on occasion in certain sectors he's taking chunks of time out of the leader, on the lap times he's actually going slower than his brother Luke Garlic out in front because he is just getting stuck in all of these battles. But Luke Garlic did a 2:26.7 that time around, which interestingly is 1.8 seconds slower than his personal best and the fastest lap of the race so far. In clean air, I'm convinced that Conor Garlic can go a few seconds quicker than that. Here he is up alongside Harry Mangian now. Pulls alongside, he'll have more momentum down the straight, less friction as well with the slick tyres, so they'll perform a bit better in a straight line, and he will almost clear Mangian, I think, before he hits the brakes. He will then outbrake Mangian and make that move stick with minimal fuss, minimal time lost. 43.1 is 1.4 seconds quicker than Luke Garlic in sector 1, and he's up into 4th position now. He should be with Nick White before too much longer. Key here is getting through the traffic as quickly as possible for Conor Garlic. There's no doubt that he is going to have the speed here to close in on the race leader with 10.25 minutes to go, unless he wastes time, really, battling with other drivers. This was Matt Shaw's moment, meanwhile, through Luffield. Just drifts a bit wide, then gets a snap of oversteer, runs out of racetrack, and just sort of almost leant on the gravel there to straighten the car up. And good car control on display from Matt, who is 3rd only in the AM class at the moment. It's actually Martin Thomas, the car directly ahead of him, number 75, that runs 2nd in that class, and that's an important battle for those two. Nick White, meanwhile, has now succumbed to the charge from Conor Garlic, and is down to 4th place. There is Luke Garlic. Well, he's trying to find the wet side of the road. The trouble is there isn't a wet side of the road anymore. It's dried out completely. So those wet tyres already starting to overheat are only going to get hotter. They're going to start producing less and less grip. And, well, there you can see how it worked. On lap 2, the first full flying lap, Conor Garlic was 4 seconds slower than the race leader. He's been only fractionally slower than the leader the last few laps, but that's because he's been in traffic. This lap, though, I think almost certainly is going to be a new fastest lap of the race. Conor Garlic, purple sector 1, personal best sector 2, purple sector 3. The lap time for Luke Garlic, the race leader, is a 2:27.411, and as Conor Garlic moves up into 2nd place with ease, he gets past Mckenzie Douglass, he moves into 2nd, he crosses the timing line and does a 2:23.7, nearly 4 seconds quicker than the race leader, so the gap is down to 10.7, and now there is no more traffic for Conor Garlic to negotiate, and he is just going to he's going to set sail now and keep eating into that margin. But I think in clean air he could take 5 seconds a lap out of Luke Garlic, maybe a bit more, so I don't think it's going to take too long to catch him. Ben McKenna, by the way, as you can see on the timing tower, has pitted. I think he's finally admitted defeat. Not only was he on the wrong tyres, but he hadn't really been looking after those tyres, and I think he realised that he was now just going to plummet to the back of the field. Probably quite good fun sliding the car around the track, but ultimately that's not his car. He doesn't want to end up damaging it. Don't believe he's in for the full season. Scott McKenna, of course, was in that car at Oulton Park, and Ben McKenna wants to make sure that he doesn't bin it and give the team a lot of repair work, and himself a fairly hefty repair bill. Right, sector 1, just the 2.3 seconds quicker for Conor Garlic, 2.4 actually, and that means the gap is well under 10 seconds already. Sector 2 will come in very shortly. It's just on the exit of Club Corner. A 31.8 for Luke Garlic. For Conor, it's a 31.3, so another few tenths gained. Outright fastest first sector, personal best second sector. And Conor Garlic, by the end of this lap, I reckon is going to be within about 5 seconds of the race lead. And the trouble for Luke is that there is still 7.5 minutes to go. So it has ultimately come down to a tyre call here, which is what we were teasing throughout the 3 hours of the Silverstone 500, but we just never got to this point where a slick tyre was going to be demonstrably faster than a wet. But in this race, that absolutely has happened. Conor Garlic proving that now. Really, I think this slick tyre was probably the fastest tyre from lap 2. Once he got the heat into the tyres, he was faster than anybody else, just had to work his way through the traffic, wasn't able to really show that pace, but I think we were basically at slick conditions before the race even started. But it's so tricky for the teams because unlike British GT, who are based in the garages, and the teams have their Pirelli slick tyres sat in a tyre oven at the back of the garage, ready and waiting to go, you know, they can bolt those tyres on at a moment's notice. For the support races, who are all based in the paddock here on the national circuit, they're not able to do that. So they have to make a decision on setup and on tyres perhaps half an hour or more before the race starts, because you've got to apply that setup and put those tyres on the car. Then you've got to get the car across to the assembly area about 20 minutes before your race actually starts. So you don't have that luxury of making a last-minute call. You've got to decide well in advance, and the track has dried so quickly that I think that's just caught a few of them out. Only Conor Garlic was brave enough to take the gamble, and I think it's going to pay off, because on that particular lap he did a 2:21.2, which was almost too many seconds for me to count up. What was that? About 7 seconds quicker, I think, that time around than his brother. And there you can see the live gap as they head down the Hanger Straight. At the end of sector 1, it has come down from 3.9 to 1.4. He's going to be past him, I think, within the next 2 or 3 corners, realistically. Carries a lot more speed through Stowe. Tries now to close in ever further down in the braking zone at Club. It's only a matter of time. I don't even think we'll see Luke Garlic really try and defend this now. Conor quite clearly is catching. Of course, they may be brothers, they may be teammates, but they are both competing in the full championship. And Luke Garlic is ahead of Conor by 9 points. Conor 15 behind Mckenzie Douglass. So a good opportunity here for Conor Garlic to overhaul that deficit that he has to his brother in the championship. His brother will be aware of that too, but I just don't think there's anything Luke can do here to offer up any sort of defence. He's trying, though, in fairness, slides across the nose of Conor's car, heading to the inside line at Village, forces Conor to go the long way round. Conor then turns back across a bit too early, actually, hits the curb, but that didn't seem to slow him down too much. He's on the outside at the loop, and Luke Garlic tried to park the car on the apex, but they just couldn't keep the car on the apex. It drifted out wide, and Conor Garlic through into first position, and that should be it now. Don't see any way that Luke Garlic can retaliate again. Pulls over to the wetter, in theory, side of the road, but it just isn't wet over there anymore. There is hardly a drop of moisture left on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, and it means those wet tyres are just going to keep on getting worse and worse and worse. So Conor Garlic leads. Unfortunately, race is over for Martin Thomas. Martin Thomas had been sat second place in the AM class, but Thomas has had a drama, pulled off, I think, on the exit of Stowe, is that? I think that's the exit of Stowe corner. And he has pulled to the side of the road, well out of the way though, so no need for a safety car or anything like that. Got the lead that Conor Garlic's got already, a 2.5 second cushion now. Even with that battle and that overtake, he was still 5.5 seconds quicker than his teammate. 6.5 seconds, actually. Through goes Luke Garlic second, then third Mckenzie Douglass, fourth Harry Mangan there. Fifth is the AM leader, that's Nick White. And Matt Shaw behind him. Now is Shaw catching Nick? No, about half a tenth slower on that previous lap. So Matt Shaw, of course, does now inherit second place in the class, though. He'll be pretty happy with that. It's not looking likely to outscore Nick White, who is putting together already a pretty solid championship campaign, isn't he? He's been almost unstoppable in the AM class, just the one race that he hasn't won so far, which I seem to recall was the first race at Oulton Park. Nick always didn't go quite well, I seem to recall, in the wet conditions in GT Academy. Every race since then almost has been affected by rain in some way. Matt Shaw heads down the hanger straight though, still pushing on. Actually, a couple of tenths quicker in sector 1 that time. 3 minutes to go. This is the penultimate lap of the race, and realistically, Matt just isn't going to be able to do that, I don't think, unless Nick White has a drama. Everybody else seems to be on the same tyre, don't they? I think they're all on the wet tyres. There's no one else that we can expect to suddenly come charging through the field in quite the way that Conor Garlic has. And it looks likely that this will be in running orders of the flag. It is worth pointing out, though, that Luke Garlic has still driven a superb race, and actually, had Conor Garlic not been on a slick tyre, we'd be talking about Luke Garlic leading by 10 seconds, because he's 10 seconds clear of Mckenzie Douglass, which is an even bigger lead margin than he had at any point yesterday. Matt Shaw way wide through Abbey Corner there. Drifts wide over the curve. That will have lost him any time that he might have gained in the earlier sectors. But yeah, Conor Garlic aside, this has been a dominant performance again from Luke, who on the same tyres as everybody else, apart from Conor, has simply dominated, really. No one else has been able to run his pace. He's lapping, well, not on the last lap, but most laps before that, at least 1.5 seconds, sometimes 2.5 seconds a lap faster than the next best car. So hopefully he's not taking too much out of his tyres. We'll see what this lap time is. He's been losing a bit of time on this one to Mckenzie Douglass. Conor Garlic already through onto the final lap, though. A new fastest lap of the race, a 2 minutes 20.4. Yesterday's fastest lap, set by Luke Garlic, was a 2:14.1. So it goes to illustrate, I suppose, that still the track conditions are not perfect, because he's still 6 seconds off a proper dry lap time. It's possible that they're still running a bit of a wet setup on that car. Maybe they didn't have time to change the setup, just the tyres. Yeah, either way, the track clearly not quite at its best. Mckenzie Douglass, by the way, did take 1.1 seconds out of Luke Garlic that time around, but Luke, I suspect, has just backed off, knowing that no one else was likely to be catching him. He may have even known that his brother had gone for slick tyres, and once Conor came through, Luke sort of knew then that that was the race done. He wasn't going to win it, but equally there was no one else really coming up behind to challenge him. Garlic, though, has played this one to perfection, really. Conor started his season off at Oulton Park with one race win, that coming in the third and final race of the weekend. And looking now to claim a second. He's only been off the podium once, in fairness, a 4th place finish in race 1 at Oulton. So it has been a reasonably strong season, this, for Conor. He will pick up the maximum points for this race, though, which will be 36 out of a possible 37 points. He'll get 35 for winning, a bonus point for the fastest lap. He won't get the bonus point for starting from pole position, of course, because that was Luke Garlic who takes that point. But Luke will therefore score 31. It will be a 5-point swing between them, but they're both going to gain on Mckenzie Douglass. So it's going to be actually very close. In fact, it might be a tie for the championship lead between Douglass and Luke Garlic at the end of this race, with Conor only a few points back. So it's going to be very tight heading into Donington Park in just over a month's time. But for now, Conor Garlic focused solely on Silverstone. The slick tyre gamble has paid off, and it's going to be a second victory of the season in the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship for Conor Garlic here at Silverstone. And that was an inspired tyre choice. Who made that call? I don't know, whether it was driver or team or a solution that they came to between themselves. But Conor is the one who got the job done, and Luke Garlick is going to have dropped nearly 20 seconds by the flag to come home in second place. This is Nick White, so Nick has slipped backwards a little bit in the second half of the race and was still being caught by Matt Shaw, actually, even on this final lap, but I think he'll still be good for the AM class win. There goes Luke Garlick second, third Mckenzie Douglass. Harry Mangian will be fourth, which might well be his best finish of the year. No, it matches actually his position from race 1 yesterday, but Nick White comes through and claims another victory in the AM class to further extend his winning margin. That's a 4th victory from 5 races, and he's still yet to finish any worse than second in class across any of these races. And Matt Shaw will have to settle for second. He was 3.2 seconds back at the flag, so actually he didn't take in fact, he lost some time in the end on that final lap. Perhaps just backed off, perhaps there was a mistake earlier on in the lap, I'm not so sure. But it is Conor Garlic, the winner, and he, just to illustrate the point, set the new fastest lap on the last lap of the race as well, a 2:20.230. Never quite got into the 2:19s, so that means still about 6 seconds or so off a true dry lap time. But Conor, with the slick tyre choice, was the correct choice, and he is a very well-deserving race winner. Spotted that on the green flag laps that they had behind the safety car. He was just weaving around that much more aggressively than everybody else. If you're on a wet tyre and you can see that you've probably made the wrong decision, then the last thing you want to do actually is be generating any extra tyre temperature. Whereas Conor was really wrestling the car. He was then very slow on the first lap, just trying to sort of coax the tyres into the window. But once he got going and he got some heat into those Pirelli slicks, he was unstoppable, and in the end, his fastest lap of 2:20.2 is about 4.5 seconds quicker than anybody else managed at any point in that race, the next best, unsurprisingly, being Luke, his brother. But by the end of the race, he was taking nearly 10 seconds a lap out of him, so those wet tyres just got worse and worse as the race went on, and the slicks came more and more into their own. So Conor Garlic then is victorious in our second Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship race of the weekend, his second victory of the year, to close in on the championship lead now. Luke Garlic will also be very close to the championship lead after more solid points are banked for second. Mckenzie Douglass completing the podium. Harry Mangian was 4th ahead of Nick White in 5th. It was a Raceway Motorsport 1, 2, 3, 4 in the AM class. White winning, Matt Shaw 2nd, Peter Mangian 3rd, and John Kearney 4th in class. Then it was Dan Reed 9th overall, 5th of the AMs. Martin Thomas and Ben McKenna, neither of whom were running at the flag. Thomas pulled off trackside, and Ben McKenna retired to the pit lane, I suspect, once he realised that his tyres were well past their best. So a pair of entertaining races here at Silverstone then for the Ginetta GT Championship. They will head to Donington Park for 3 more races at the end of May, once more alongside the British GT Championship. So the second race of the weekend, Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT Championship, saw Luke Garlic start from pole position, but it was a feisty Nick White trying to make the moves for second place in the early stages, but couldn't quite find a way past Mckenzie Douglass and Ben McKenna. McKenna was sensationally exciting to watch in the early stages, but his wet tyres overheated very quickly. He was sideways more than he was going forwards, but still put up a very stout defence to, for quite a while, keep Mckenzie Douglass and Nick White at bay. Douglass eventually found a way past him at Brooklands. It wasn't then long before Nick White managed to do the same thing, but whilst all of this was going on, there was one driver further down the order who was in a completely different race to the rest of them. Whilst these front runners were slipping and sliding around on very worn out tyres and at times making contact with each other, Conor Garlic was charging through the order. He was the only driver to select slick tyres, and after a couple of laps of getting some heat into them, he was comfortably the fastest man on the track. He carved his way through into second place, got past Mckenzie Douglass, and then set about catching his brother, race leader Luke Garlic. He eventually made the move coming out of the loop. There was nothing really that Luke could do, and Conor Garlic went on to win the race by 20 seconds, despite only taking the lead with a couple of laps to go. It was an inspired tyre choice, but Conor still had to get the job done on those slicks. It was still damp and greasy in certain areas, but he managed to find the grip and went on to claim a dominant second victory of the season to tighten up the front runners in the championship as we head to Donington Park.